taking the more minutes just to welcome today's to the session. We are truly honored to have with us Dr. Azam Arastu Saab. He is a vice president, chief engineer, retired Boeing Space and Defense System. He is also Apex Consultants in Aerospace and Energy Technologies in Los Angeles. So he is also the founding member and board member of Aspire Pakistan. So उसका अल्हम्दुलिल्लाह बहुत ज़्यादा पाकिस्तान जिस तरह पहले ही बता दिया कि पाकिस्तान के लिए उन्होंने बहुत काम किया, पाकिस्तान से बाहर जाके पाकिस्तान को रिप्रेजेंट किया और बहुत अच्छी पोजीशन पे पाकिस्तान का नाम रोशन किया है. तो हम फख्र महसूस करते हैं कि आज उन्होंने हमारे लिए टाइम निकाला है और इंशाल्लाह विद ऑन द टॉपिक ऑफ यूनिट इकोनॉमिक्स इंशाल्लाह he will explain more about this topic. So with that, I'm leaving the floor to respected Dr. Azam Arastu Saab. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Azarullah. Assalamu alaikum, everybody. First of all, I truly apologize for the delay. I don't know what happened, but so, G, can you hear me?
सब लोग माइक को म्यूट प्लीज. Qasim, आप देखिए जी.
So without much preamble, I'll get straight to the topic. Entrepreneurship के लिए जो आप सब मेहनत कर रहे हैं और करनी भी चाहिए, इसके लिए like famous adage है कि what gets measured gets improved. So but anything that you do, you have to measure the performance in various forms. So what are the unit metrics which we should measure specifically for startups? So that's the focus of this discussion today. Okay, it's a very important subject, or you really have to understand the concepts behind it and live and breathe these numbers because that really help you making proper decisions, strategic decisions, changes, etc. So let's get on with it. Unit economics. Unit economics है क्या? Basically, आपका जो भी business है, आपका software business हो या right share business हो या food business हो या whatever manufacturing business हो, so you have to that unit will be either your customer or a sale or a unit that is your an account or whatever. So a single unit पे आप information ले आए, आपके accounts ले आए और आपके numbers ले आए, so then it will help you understand what makes that unit cost, profit, and so on. So this discussion is all about that. So you basically, rather than taking gross numbers, you're breaking down per unit. So unit economics basically refers to the direct revenues and costs associated with a single unit of a product or a service a company offers. It helps startups understand how profitable their businesses are on a per unit basis. So if you work out per unit basis, then you can scale up and down to figure out आपका overall performance कैसी है. Why is it important? Because startups can gain insights into whether the business model is viable and scalable, and also helps you make strategic decisions going on. So importance क्या है? What is the importance of unit economics? First, it helps you determine the scalability and profitability. आप जो भी चीज कर रहे हैं, and we'll come into a lot of examples as we go through, whether it's software business and as I said, provides insight into long-term business sustainability. Business आपको sustainable चाहिए, it has to be scalable, it has to be profitable, so it gives you a measure of that. And it's crucial for decision making in pricing, marketing, and growth strategies. So it really affects all areas. And the key benefits for startups is that it's for a startup के लिए there is not a single startup in the world who is cash rich or resource rich. अगर वैसा हो तो I don't think I've known anybody like that. So always everybody is struggling. with resources, with cash, with revenues. So जब जब किल्लत होती है पैसों की, जब that's the time when you have to be very careful in the way you spend the money, the way you so you have to understand कि आपके economics है क्या. That's why for startups in particular, these are extremely important. It helps you understand the cash flow and the break-even points, and helps you evaluate growth strategies with limited resources, and helps gain investor confidence by demonstrating a path to profitability. This is again a very important point. Startups have to go to the investors to ask for further funds, further investment, and the investors will always ask you questions about really dealing with unit economics. आप देख लें शार्क टैंक देख लें और तमाम इस टाइप के प्रोग्राम्स हैं. The investors will only all the questions they will ask are related to your unit economics. So you have to have these numbers on your fingertips. So there are several unit economics terms हैं, which you will hear all the time, and I will go through some of them. So there are, I've listed 12 of them here, and we'll go through each one of them, define what they are, how do we calculate them, what are they, and give some examples and why are they important. So the ones that we deal with are, first thing that will everybody ask is, what is the customer acquisition cost? आपको एक और customer बनाने का है. How much does it cost to add one more customer to your list? That's something you need to understand. Then also you need to know what's the average revenue per user or per customer. So, it's called ARPU. Another very valuable, very important unit economics is the term called lifetime value, LTV. Okay. Then the other ones are cost of goods sold, COGS. Then you have to understand the margins. There are several margins you'd keep hearing about: gross margin, operating margin, and contribution margin. इसके differences क्या हैं? Why are they important? And you need to understand. अगर आपसे सवाल किया गया contribution margin का और आपने gross margin के जवाब दे दिया investor conference में, then you'll be thrown out. So you need to understand exactly what these margins are, what they include, what they don't include, and what is the importance of each one of them. Then some other which are very very important are, what are the retention rates? आपने retention rate, and then there's another one which is corollary to that, is called churn rate. Churn rate and retention rate are also very very important, and again we'll go through each one of them separately. Then average order value is important, and then lastly are 2 points which are called either break-even points or payback period. Again, they are related. What's the break-even point and payback period? Again, investor will most likely ask that question, or at least he will calculate in their mind. So let's go through each one of them one by one. Customer acquisition cost, CAC. This is probably the most important. This is the cost of acquiring new customer. Okay. How do you calculate it? It's simple. The interesting thing is all these unit economics calculations are extremely simple, extremely just simple arithmetic. There's no fancy calculation, but you need to understand what it means and the importance and the way to you need to feel the number is kya value hai. So CAC is simply taking the total marketing plus sales expenses divided by number of customers acquired. Simple. And it's the high. It's important if you have very high CAC or customer acquisition cost, which means then that can strain cash flow and profitability. So it is crucial to keep this number in check, especially in the early stages, because if you're spending too much money to acquire every customer, you can't get enough cash flow or profitability. It'll eat on your profitability. Let's take a couple of examples. A SaaS company. A SaaS is, as you know, a software as a service. This is the usual class of startups. A SaaS company spends $50,000 in marketing and sales per month and acquires 250 new customers. So the CAC will be simply 50,000 divided by 250, which is 200. So you're basically spending $200 per customer to add on. An e-commerce startup spends $120,000 on advertising and sales effort in a quarter and acquire 1,000 new customers. So the CAC will be 120,000 divided by 1,000, which is 120. Okay, extremely simple calculation. Okay, let's go on. Average revenue per user. Average revenue, this is the average revenue that is generated per user or customer. User, customer is the same. So ARPU is really the total revenue divided by total number of customers. This helps measure the revenue potential of the customer base, aiding in revenue forecasting. So a simple example is, this is a social media platform has, say, $1 million in revenue and 100,000 users. So the ARPU, or average revenue per user, is 1 million divided by 100,000 equals 10. So basically every customer is generating about $10. A SaaS platform generates $250,000 in revenue and $10,000 customers. So the ARPU will be 250,000 divided by 10,000, which is 25. So the average user of a SaaS platform will generate about $25 revenue. Okay. So I'm trying to go a little fast to make up for the time loss. So, but we'll have time for the end and for questions. So now let's look at another very important metric, which is called lifetime value. Is commonly known as LTV. Also, some people call it customer lifetime value, CLTV. They're both the same. So what do they mean? That is the total revenue a business expects from a customer over the entire relationship. So if you have a customer which lasts, okay, let's give, hang on, let's wait for the example later on. So what is an LTV? LTV is, how do we calculate it? We calculate it simply by the average purchase value times average purchase frequency times customer lifetime. Okay, because this is over the lifetime. So average customer value times average customer frequency times customer lifetime. And the importance of this that the LTV should ideally be higher than CAC for sustainable growth. So obviously, if your customer acquisition cost is higher than the LTV, that means then you're losing money. Okay, so, and let's take an example. An online subscription service has an average monthly revenue of $20 per customer, with customers staying for an average of 24 months. So LTV will be 20 times 24 is 480. Okay. Then another example is a mobile app averages $15 a month revenue per user, and the customer typically stays for 36 months. So the LTV is going to be 15 times 36 equals $640. $540. Okay. Now, it's important to understand, for a healthy business, the ratio between LTV and CAC. As I said earlier, you need to make sure the LTV and CAC ratio is greater than 3, at least greater than 3. If it is less than that, you're in trouble, because it means you're spending a lot of money to acquire one customer and they're not staying there long enough. So at least you need to get 3 times the value back of your customer acquisition cost from the customer. Anything less than that, you need to do something. Either your customer acquisition cost ko aap change kare, or do something else to increase your lifetime value. So This helps you make some decisions in terms of your advertisement, in terms of you're looking at your cost of customers acquisition cost and so on. So this is a very good metric to understand. So the LTV to CAC ratio must be cannot be equal to 1. If it is, then you'll not be wasting your time. It has to be, the higher the better. But I would say anything less than 3, you need to take some action, drastic action to get things done. But try to keep that ratio as high as, again, so keep when you calculate all these metrics, also look at this ratio to make sure your numbers are right. So I also consider these unit metrics as a blood report. You go to the doctor, and the doctor has got a lot of, what you do is you take your blood test and you take your liver and all other basic measurements, and you know what the average value should be for a person, for a male, female, for an average age. Every age has and so basically every business would have a certain kind of unit economics metrics, and you make sure that you're well within the normal range of that particular business type. So when things go out of balance, for example, your cholesterol goes up, and the doctor will give you cholesterol medication or blood pressure medication. So sometimes you also like cholesterol makes ratio of high, good HDL, low HDL. So you measure things in a different ways to understand what the health of a human being is. Similarly, this provides you the health of the business. It's as important as that, and you have to measure this on a regular basis. So let's keep going forward. Gross margin. Gross margin क्या है? So gross margin is the profit made from each unit after deducting the cost of goods sold. Okay, so you'll ask what cost of goods is. I should have presented that slide before, but again, I'll talk about that in more detail later on. So gross margin is really the total revenue minus the cost of the goods sold. This indicates how much profit each unit contributes to covering other business expenses. Okay, so for example, a coffee shop sells each coffee for $5, and the cost of the materials and labor per coffee is $2. So the gross margin per unit or per coffee is 5 minus 2 equals 3. So 3 is your gross margin. An online retailer sells gadgets for $100 with COGS or cost of goods sold of $60 per unit. So essentially, it costs him $60. He sells for $100. The gross margin is 100 minus 60, 40. Okay, that's your gross margin. Then there's another term which is also important. It's called contribution margin. Okay, so this is the amount remaining from sales revenue after variable cost, which helps to cover fixed cost. Okay, I'm introducing new terms: variable costs, fixed costs. So we'll have to define that also in a minute. So contribution margin is the total revenue minus variable cost, not the fixed cost. Okay, so that's what the contribution margin is. The importance of that is a positive contribution margin per unit is essential for business viability and scalability. So yeah, it's really important. You have to increase your contribution margin to make sure your business is viable and also scalable. Again, you have to think of a scalability all the time because you want to expand the business, and the scalability measurements are really important. Couple examples. A food delivery service generates $10 per delivery with variable costs. Variable costs in this case will be driver fees, packaging, etc., of $6. So variable cost is $6, and you charge them $10. So contribution margin is 10 minus 6, $4. So every food delivery item, you get $4 as contribution margin. A digital service provider charges $100 per subscription with variable cost of $20, for example, and that's variable cost is, for example, the server fees. Contribution margin then will be 100 minus 20 equals 80. So 80 is the contribution, is your contribution margin. So the higher the better. Now, again, example here. If there's a unit per unit, if you're charging $50 and your variable cost is $15, your contribution margin is $35. I think rest I've already explained. So now let me talk about these margins and summarize them in a single chart to figure out what these margins are, how is it measured, what are the formulas, what it excludes, and why is it important. So I mentioned about contribution margin. So contribution margin measures revenue minus variable costs. Okay, so it's variable cost only, doesn't take into fixed costs. Contribution margin equals simple, arithmetic is simple, revenue minus variable cost. It excludes fixed cost, it excludes operating expenses, taxes, and interest. So to get the real margin, real profit, you need to include all this. So contribution margin does not include fixed cost, operating expenses, taxes, and interest. So it tells you is unit profitability on a simpler scale. Gross margin is revenue after COGS, after all the cost of goods sold, which means so revenue minus COGS divided by revenue times 100, which this gives you in percentage terms, but it still excludes operating expenses, taxes, and interest. It provides core profitability, not unit profitability. It provides profitability of the whole business, not the per unit. Then operating margin is revenue after COGS and operating expenses, which is operating margin equals operating income divided by revenue times 100. Please note operating income equals revenue minus COGS minus operating expenses. Okay, so this one includes the operating expenses, but it does not include taxes and interest. Okay, this is important if you want to find out the operational efficiency. So the first unit is per unit profitability. Gross margin gives you core business profitability, and then operating margin gives you operational efficiency. How efficiently are you managing your business? Then comes net margin. Net margin is revenue after all expenses. So the net margin is net margin equals net income divided by revenue times 100, and this is really income minus all inclusive, including taxes and expenses. So this one includes all expenses and gives you overall profitability. So from a business standpoint, if you want to make sure you're profitable or not, you need to look at net margin. Okay. Then there's another term that you always see in accounting terms. It's called EBITDA, which is basically it's an accounting term, which is operational profitability, excluding non-cash items. There are non-cash items also that you need to include into your business. For example, depreciation, amortization, and so on. So without including those, if you don't include those and interest and taxes, so this way it'll give you some performance, some measure of what the excuse me. So this is a number which is used by the accountants primarily to make sure that how well is your business doing compared to the others in the industry because this does not include depreciation, amortization. That's very unique to the way you accounts you do your accounts, but it gives you a fairly decent understanding of how good. If you want to buy a company or acquire a business, you look at EBITDA, GDA, because that gives you in family comparison to other businesses. Okay. This is a good chart as you can keep for your reference. Let's take a quick example of them. I take example here is a company or a business that you have which has revenue of $100,000. The total cost of goods sold is $50,000. The operating expenses are $30,000, and then you have depreciation and amortization cost of $5,000. The interest charge on your expenses on finances is $3,000 and $2,000 in taxes. So let's calculate each one of those margins. So contribution margin will be simply $100,000 minus cost of goods sold is $50,000. Gross margin is 100,000 minus 50,000, again divided by 100,000. In percentage terms is 50%, 50% gross margin. Operating margin is 100,000 minus 50,000 minus 30 times 100, divided by 100,000 times 100 gives you 20%. So 20% of operating margin, 50% gross margin, and then the EBITDA is again 100,000 minus 50 minus 30 plus taxes, plus depreciation and amortization gives you 25,000, and then finally the net margin is 20 minus 30 minus 2 gives you 15%. So you think you're making a lot of money out of the business. Although your gross contribution margin is 50,000, your gross margin is 50,000, but your net margin after all these things is only 15%. So it's good to understand these numbers very, very well. Now we talk about pricing. How do you price a product, a service, whatever you have? So you need to, in order to make yourself profitable, you need to include all these things, because someone has to pay for all these things, and because somebody has to pay for your direct costs, indirect costs, distribution costs, marketing costs, R&D, CAC, taxes, financing, and desired profit margin. All that has to be accounted for to get your pricing down. So a lot of people, especially startups, make a huge mistake, and they think, oh well, I'm making per unit 50% gross margin. I can take I can cut down profit, and I can offer a price, and then you find out by the time you end up with all other costs, you are way negative. So example for price is you need to, including, as I said, this equation here, so you need to include all these costs. So let's take an example. If a consumer electronics company is pricing a product with direct cost of 200, which includes direct materials and labor, indirect cost of 50, which is overhead, which means you have to have an office, you have to have a building, you have to have some people and so on to take in all that in per unit. If you comes to $50 per unit, then distribution costs are $20, marketing $15, CAC 10, taxes 10, and if you want desired profit margin, you want 30% margin on top of everything, then the price would be 200 plus 50 plus 20 plus 15 plus 10 plus 10 divided by 1 plus 1 minus 0.3. That's the desired margin we have. So the pricing should be $430. So this is important to understand that you have. Can anybody hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, okay, because I've just
Yes,
some,
sir.
I'm getting some messages from, so I was making sure that you can you hear me loud and clear. So you see the cost is $200, but to get 30% profit margin and paying for everything else, the pricing should be 430. Now the only lever that you have here is your margin, is your profit margin, right? You can, this price can change. If you reduce to 30% profit margin, this number will go down. But you cannot change direct cost. You can't change indirect cost, distribution cost, marketing cost. You can make efforts to change a little bit, but they are there. So don't ever make a mistake of pricing yourself outside this, such that you don't cover your costs of all kinds. Okay, very, very important, very important. I've seen many startups go under because they are too ambitious and they start cutting too much, and then you completely are wiped out. Okay, let's talk retention rate. Retention rate is the percentage of customers who continue using product slash service over a given period. Okay, so you want to make sure every customer you get is there for as long as possible, because the longer they are, it's like you bring a customer in your shop, you want them to stay longer. The more they stay, the more they buy. Similarly, the software service, Uber service, rideshare service, whatever service you want, and plus you spend you spend X amount of dollars to gain a customers. You want this customer to keep coming and over. You don't want that customer to go back. So the retention rate is extremely important. Always keep a very close eye on retention rate. Formula is very simple. It's customers at the end of a period minus customers acquired divided by the customers at the start of a period times 100. Okay, so the higher retention rate means better customer loyalty and often results in higher LTV. So the longer they stay, the longer the lifetime value of that particular customer's LTV goes up. And you want to increase the LTV as high as possible. Remember, LTV has to be much higher than CAC. It cannot be, and it has to be at least three times CAC. Actually, three times CAC is not equal to, if it is there, I would be very, very worried. It has to be much, much higher than three. Three is a, when you reach three, you have a serious problem. Let's take an example. A gym started with 500 members, and then you acquired 100 new members and ended the month with 550 members. So the retention rate is 550 minus 100. Divided by 500 times 100 over 10. So I think here there's an arithmetic error here. This gym started with, it should be 550. So basically you started with 550 and you acquired 100 and ended up with 550. So basically your, so that's why your retention rate is 90%. A new, let's take another example. A software company started with 1,000 customers, gained 200 new ones, and ended with a quarter with 1,050 customers. So the retention rate is 1,050 minus 200 divided by 1,000 equals 85. So 85% is your retention rate. Churn rate is a corollary, is the kind of the opposite of, or has the similar kind of consequence as retention rate. Churn rate is the percentage of customers who stop using the product service within a period. So retention is how many you've retained, and churn is how many you have lost, essentially. That's how you see it. So churn rate is the customer lost during period divided by total customers at the start of the period. So the high churn rate suggests issues with product or customer satisfaction and impact revenue sustainability. Okay, so for example, a streaming service had 1,000 customers at the end of the month and lost 50 by the end. So the churn rate is 50 divided by 1,000 equals 5%. So 5% customers have gone. You've lost them. So churn rate is 5%. Another example is an online platform had 500 users at the beginning of the quarter and lost 25 by the end. So the churn rate is 25 by 500, and 100 equals 5%. Again, you have 5% of the customers have gone. So you want to measure-wise, you want to reduce your churn rate and you want to increase your retention rate. So same thing, they go hand in hand. But investors will ask you either churn rate or they'll ask you retention rate. So make sure you understand them very, very well. When they ask churn rate, don't give them retention rate, and vice versa. So break-even point, another important thing that you need to understand and also have a pretty good eye on. Break-even point is the number of units sold to cover all costs, fixed and variable. So this one, before we're talking about primarily about variable cost, here we're talking about fixed and total cost, fixed and variable costs. So formula for that is a break-even point equals fixed cost divided by price per unit minus variable cost per unit. Okay, so essential for understanding when this startup can expect or operate profitably. Couple of examples. So we'll look at the picture on the right hand side. For startups, usually this is even more important because you start up for startups. There will be a period of time where you will be losing money, or either period of time or period of products or units or whatever. So you'll be losing money, but you need to understand very well what is the point at which point we can start making money. So the break-even point, which investors will ask about, and you have to know a projected point at which time you can start covering your cost and start becoming more and more profitable. So example, a shop has a fixed cost of $10,000. A unit cost is 50,000 is 50, and the units variable cost is 30. The break-even units is 10,000 divided by 50 minus 30 equals 500. So basically, you have to sell about 500 units before you can reach a break-even. So understanding that helps you, your pricing and your cash flow, your investing, and so on. No. Sorry about that. Another example, a digital product has fixed cost of $5,000, a unit cost of $100, and a variable cost of 60. So the break-even units will be 5,000 divided by 100 minus 60 equals 125. So you'll have to sell 125 based on your current finances, current projections. You will have to sell at least 125 units before you can start making a single penny in profit. Okay, so it's again very important number, but it's not just a number. You have to get the feel of it, as I keep saying. And then another one is payback period, which is corollary, just like churn rate and retention rate. Payback period and break-even point is somewhat related. So payback period is the time required to recover the CAC. So you spend X amount of dollars to get a new customers. The payback period is how much can you get back from the customer before that the customer acquisition cost is made back. So payback period equals CAC divided by monthly gross margin per customer. Okay. So this will give you payback period in months. So a shorter payback period indicates quicker cash recovery, which is beneficial for cash flow. Couple of examples. A subscription box company has a CAC of $50 and earns $10 per month per customer. So the payback period will be 50 divided by 10 equals 5 months. So in 5 months, you can get the money back from that particular customer. So you make sure the customer is there for longer than 5 months for profitability. Similarly, an online retailer spends $200 to acquire each customer who generates $40 a month. So payback period is 200 divided by 40 equals 5 months. Okay. So I'm just looking at the time. I'm just keep going very fast and maybe skip this one. Average value per customer is pretty intuitive. Is each customer how much? It's like going to a grocery shop. You stuff your grocery. How much? And the end of grocery, they want to know how much per customer they are spending. So average value of order value is basically how much each customer brings into the business. Let me give you this example. An example for a food delivery startup. Let's take a following scenario. A food delivery startup charges 200 rupees per order, and each order incurs delivery rider salary per order comes to say 100 rupees. Packaging is another 50 rupees, and the marketing cost per order is 30 rupees. So the question is, what is the contribution margin per delivery? So the contribution margin in this case is 300 minus the cost of goods sold, which is 100 plus 50 plus 30 equals. So the contribution margin is 120 rupees. So I may ask this question: what is the contribution margin? So the question is this contribution margin sustainable given the market conditions? What happens if the marketing cost increase? Right. So again, I'll leave it you to think about it. If your marketing costs increase, what happens to contribution margin? So how could you now you play around with these numbers to make sure your contribution margin is as healthy as you can? Okay. I also talk about scaling it. You always want to make sure for startup businesses is scaling is a key. You always have to have an eye on making it larger, bigger, and because economy of scale helps you a lot in everything. So, for example, a this is a SaaS startup in Pakistan offers a subscription for 1,000 rupees per month per user. Fixed costs, example, costs, office rent, salaries, etc., is 500,000 rupees per month, and variable costs are per server 200 rupees per and customer support is 100 rupees per user per month. Okay, so if I have 50 users, so total profit will be contribution margin times users minus fixed cost. So in this case, the for 50 units, the total contribution margin will be 1,000 minus 200 minus 100 times 50 minus 500,000. Basically, it's a loss of 445,000 rupees. It's basically if you 50 users, you're absolutely losing money, big time. But if you increase the users to 1,000, total profit will be 1,000 minus 200 minus 100 times 1,000 now minus 500,000 equals profit of PK of 300,000. So you see the impact of scaling goes from negative to positive, by increasing the number of users. So scaling is absolutely key. And again, you need to figure out, again, in this case, what's my break-even point, break-in number of users to be able to for this business to be healthy. All right, sensitivity analysis is important. Let me keep going. I think let me take one more example here, and then go to trending. Another example is a ride-hailing startup charges say 500 rupees per ride, and includes the cost includes driver payout 300, fuel cost 100, and app commission 50. Activity is calculate. My question to you is, can you calculate unit contribution margin? Also discuss strategies to improve, example, dynamic programming, reducing fuel cost, optimizing driver payouts. Okay, and also include factors like acquisition costs and lifetime. For example, CAC. If your CAC is rupees 1,000 and LTV equals 5,000 rupees in revenue, I just want to think through this scenario and figure out what the contribution margin is, and how would dynamic pricing and all these things would help in this business. Lastly, I want to just talk about trends. Just like blood reports, you don't take a blood report or EKG and all those measurements once and then leave it. You have to do it regularly to understand the trends. So in economics, trending is extremely important. So monitoring and the economic metrics periodically is essential for ensuring the sustainable growth, identifying potential issues early, and making informed decisions to optimize profitability. So here's again why it's important, because it tracks trending. It helps track profitability, optimize customer acquisition strategy. It helps you informed decision making. It helps you manage your cash flow. It helps you identify cost efficient improvements in your system. It also helps you making strategic pivoting, also improves forecasting accuracy, and also helps you encourage a data-driven culture in the business. So example of these trending is like, basically here's an example which shows a customer acquisition cost on this side, LTV. This is the customer CAC payback. This is the LTV here for a given business. So basically, you in your whatever product you have, whatever startup you have, select a frequency, either quarterly or monthly or whatever what makes sense with this thing, and keep measuring these things. You may, even if you don't like the answers, this is extremely important. In fact, it's more important when things go out of control, they are out of range, because that's the time we need to take decisions, and the decisions you take makes your business healthy. So sorry about that. I had to rush through this because we lost time early, but this is all I had to talk about. A very important topic of unit economics, and I hope I'm going to share the slides to Zarullah. He can then put it on the net group, or anybody else would want a copy of it. I'll be more than happy to share it. Keep it as a reference. And the only thing is of value is use it extensively, and keep metrics. The more you keep, the more you understand, the better. Okay, so I'll leave the floor for any further questions.